I'm Lauren Gleason. I am the Assistant Director of Education and Museum Operations for Historic Alexandria, which owns and operates the Stabler-Leadbeater Apothecary Museum.
Callie Stapp. I'm the curator of the Stabler-Leadbeater Apothecary Museum in Old Town Alexandria, which is a City of Alexandria, Office of Historic Alexandria site.
This particular apothecary was founded here in Alexandria in 1792, and it was founded by a man named Edward Stabler. He was a young Quaker who moved here just to open his business.
In what was a thriving port city of Alexandria, which had more than 1,000 ships per year, docking, taking goods, leaving goods, very thriving commercial market.
He first rented a little shop about half a block away from the museum's current location, and by 1805, Edward Stabler was able to buy the land where the museum sits today, and he had the 3-story red brick building built that housed his apothecary until his great-grandson declared bankruptcy and closed down in 1933. So they operated for 141 years, always on the same block, in the same building, almost the entire time. So an apothecary is basically an old-fashioned word for pharmacy, but it was also a shop where you bought all things chemistry, all things chemical. You would come here not just to buy medicine, but also to buy paints and dyes, cleaning products, pesticides. Eventually, when photography is invented, you would purchase photo processing chemicals from your local apothecary. The word apothecary goes out of fashion over the course of the 1800s, eventually is replaced by pharmacy, wholesale, druggist. So if you were ill and you needed medicine, you might come straight to the apothecary, straight to the pharmacist in town, and the pharmacist was legally allowed to diagnose you and prescribe medicine for you, and they might mix medicine for you right there on the spot if they didn't have something already pre-made. You might also go to your physician, and physicians often had a little apothecary stock on their premises, and they might mix something for you. Physicians would purchase their ingredients from apothecary shops like this one. A physician might write you a prescription that you took to the local pharmacy, and the pharmacist or apothecary would fill it for you. You might also come in and know exactly what you want, and you could ask for any product, any medicine, and legally the pharmacist could make it for you, could sell it to you.
One of the frequently requested ingredients that was used in medicines were barks of all different kinds. It could be ground up and used that did have medicinal purposes. Today, we think of that as kind of strange that you're grounding up bark and using it in medicine, but they did have a lot of very useful properties for healing all kinds of things that were just standard in the 19th century. People would write in with complaints of loose teeth. They would stomach complaints. Teeth problems were a big thing. They did sell essentially toothpaste, which is made of chalk. You could also take chalk pills just like we do today with Tums.
Some of the really interesting ingredients are dragon's blood and unicorn root, which really sparks the imagination. And dragon's blood is a sap from the dragon tree, which grows throughout the world in arid regions, but probably would have been shipped from North Africa when this pharmacy was operating. And it primarily functioned as red pigment and varnish, but would have been added to medicines occasionally. Whether or not it does anything, the scientific reports haven't been made yet. Unicorn root is an ingredient that would have been harvested locally, so they would have probably bought it from maybe local farmers or local foragers. And unicorn root is a type of lily that supposedly helps the body retain estrogen. So historically and still today by herbalists, it's used particularly to treat symptoms of menopause.
We have lots of artifacts from the late 18th century and early 19th century, all the way up through the first quarter of the 20th century when they went bankrupt. So we had lots of things that they were currently selling and couldn't sell or just hadn't sold when they went bankrupt. We have a lot of early bottles that they would have ordered from London that are hand blown and would have been very expensive. One neat thing that we found out was that when you go into CVS, you buy the whole bottle. When you would have walked into an early apothecary shop, you would have paid for the bottle and also your medicine in it. So when you finish your medicine, you could bring your bottle back and get sort of a bottle discount like we think about today.
In the early decades of this pharmacy, which is really pre-industrial revolution, medicines and other products were made on a small scale. They might make some products in a batch of a few dozen that would be sold throughout the week or the month. And there were some products that were mass manufactured. There were patent medicines that would originally have been shipped over from England and sold here. And eventually there were some patent medicine manufacturers in the United States.
Patent medicines, which were very popular in the 19th century, they weren't necessarily patented, but what that meant was that the formula was secret. Really, the secret was herbs and a lot of alcohol. So it was solving some problems, not necessarily the ones that you were taking the medicines for.
Really, after the railroads become common in the United States, so 1850s, 1860s, 1870s, you see mass manufacturing growing, and pharmacies like this either stick to their small retail shop, or like this one, they actually put more effort into the wholesaling side of the business, and they bought larger stock that they would redistribute to other shops, physicians, eventually hospitals in the Washington, D.C. region. They had their own line of paints, Leadbeater paints. They had their own line of perfumes that they called Mount Vernon cologne. One big change in the way this shop operated and today is we no longer believe in the four humors theory. Today, we understand that germs exist and illnesses are spread because of germs. Historically, in the early decades of this pharmacy, if you were ill, the pharmacists and the physicians thought that it was because your humors were out of balance. This is a very simplified explanation of the four humors theory. They thought you had blood, which is why bloodletting was sometimes done, black bile and yellow bile, which referred to all sorts of fluids in the body, and phlegm, which we basically still use the word phlegm today to refer to mucus. They might give you a medicine that was an expectorant that would help cough up phlegm if you had a chest cold. That would actually help, but they were doing it because they thought your humors were out of balance and you had too much phlegm, so let's balance out the phlegm by reducing it. That's not done anymore, obviously. There are still herbal ingredients that were used historically as medicine that the pharmacists and physicians were maybe using them for different reasons, but modern science has shown that they're actually effective. One really great example is ergot. Ergot is a fungus that grows on grain, like on wheat and rye. And historically, by the 1800s, it was being used for hemorrhaging, to stop hemorrhaging, and was sometimes used in relation to childbirth, which hemorrhaging can definitely be a side effect of childbirth. And that's how it's still used today. It's used in a drug called methergy that is often administered for hemorrhaging.
So the two buildings at 105 and 107 South Fairfax Street, while they may look a little bit different than when they were originally built in 1805 and 1815, they were built in the Federal style. Alexandria as a city was slow to adopt between the Georgian style and the Federal style. The buildings are both connected, and they have been connected since 1829. There are doors cut through at many levels in order to facilitate movement across buildings in storage and preparation areas. And so there were doors knocked through those as well. And so it facilitated, again, movement of materials and workmen between all levels of the buildings. Both 105 and 107 have lifts for all three floors. 105 South Fairfax Street actually has a large wheel that facilitates one person moving large crates up and down between the first floor and also the third floor for storage. So that's one of several that are still in existence in Old Town that are kind of a novelty now, but were standard for business practices for merchant buildings in Alexandria. in the 18th century.
There is the retail shop on the first floor, which was customer space. And the second floor is a manufacturing space, which would have been employees only. Both spaces still have a lot of ingredients left behind in the drawers and the bottles. If you came into the second floor, the manufacturing space, there would have been probably a few employees, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 employees pulling ingredients from drawers and mixing product, probably dozens of bottles at a time that they would then either redistribute locally or possibly just sell downstairs in their own retail shop. On the first floor, if you know Latin, then the ingredients aren't too hard to spot. But on the second floor, things are in English. That probably lets us know that there were lesser trained assistants working on the second floor in the manufacturing room.
After the business went bankrupt in 1933, there was an auction in early 1934, and what became the Landmark Society purchased the 2 buildings that comprise the museum today and hired Thomas Waterman to redo them and kind of put them back to the 18th century because at the time they thought the buildings were built in 1770. And so when they did that, Thomas Waterman kind of shaved off what was an Italianate facade that was on 107. The very distinct curved glass windows that we see today are based on curved shutters that were found in the attic of 107. So they based the facade on that and figured that that would have been closest to if George Washington were alive or Martha Washington came to shop in the 18th century, that's the facade that they would have recognized. Today we're open for tours. We are open 6 days a week. In the mornings, you can do a self-guided tour and see the first floor. If you would like more of an extended tour, you can do a 45-minute guided tour of both the first and the second floors and get to see the manufacturing room that I'm sitting in right now. It's a little bit of an extra way to see essentially kind of like a Harry Potter laboratory. Speaking of Harry Potter, we actually do Harry Potter birthday tours every July. That's a big event. We do specialty tours based on different subjects, midwifery, poisons, things like that. So there's always something else to see beyond the regular tour that we offer throughout the year.